Hey, just before you see the video, just know that that was completely off the cuff. It was like as soon as I got home from the movie, I ran, grabbed my camera, and just started filming some of my thoughts. So it's definitely not perfect. I stumbled over my words a lot, and there's a lot of stuff I said that was like weird sayings. I'm like Michael Scott that way, but hope you enjoy because I still feel like I had some fun things to say, and eventually maybe I might write something more about it. Awesome. Thanks. Hello. So I just saw Barbie and I have a lot of things to say. I thought like on the surface, like obviously it was a really great movie just about talking about feminism and looking at how the ways in which patriarchy can infiltrate itself into our many systems. And I thought it was really good. It was fun. It was cute. It was kitsch. All of the above. But I had a lot more to say in terms of what the movie didn't say, but what it represents. I thought it was really interesting the ways in which it represents the culture industry, a term that was termed by philosophers Adorno and Horkheimer, and it looks at how our culture is basically just under capitalism, all culture is produced for profit, and therefore all culture that we actually have basically exists as a means to earn profit. And I think what's really, really interesting about Barbie is that it really said a lot of great things about criticizing what capitalism is and certain ways. It even like it criticized patriarchy, obviously. It criticizes all these things about what we should be while still basically at every single point being a brand for Mattel and like Barbie, obviously, but throughout the movie there's like a car chase scene at one point and every little frame you see looks exactly like a car commercial, and I feel like the movie really did that on purpose, because it was just so obvious that you couldn't help but realize that this was basically just them really trying to push in your face Chevy. Like I think they were driving like a Chevy EV and you see them switch to a sport mode and they go really fast, and I think the movie's like cognizant of that fact. But what's interesting is the fact that under capitalism, anything that we do, we try to break down patriarchy, we try to like liberate ourselves. It ultimately still keeps us, as like Adorno and Horkheimer talked about in their discussion around the culture industry, it still keeps us enslaved under the capitalist norm. It's not something that we can actually escape, because as soon as we start to promote it, we start to put it in our movies. These movies, we can't just like, I mean, you could potentially make your own movie, try to distribute it yourself, but ultimately you're still at the whims of capitalism and you cannot escape that. And I just think that was a really, really interesting aspect, because this movie was trying to say something while still being inherently tied to capitalism, and it was kind of inescapable, because when we say, yes, girl power, crush the patriarchy, but now it's a brand deal, it's going to make money. It's something that, I mean, even in the movie at one point, they talk about making an ordinary Barbie, and they're like, oh, that'll be extremely profitable. The movie knows everything it's saying, but it's still playing into it. And that's what's so insidious about capitalism and capitalist recuperation, is the fact that any kind of movement ultimately gets co-opted by the capitalist. And any kind of these abstract ideas, another thing that was in the movie is the fact that Barbie, and I purposely did this in my Lego room because something like Lego, and I've got Batman posters in the back, all culture under capitalism is basically created by companies. Like old culture doesn't really exist anymore in terms of just humans' non-genetic adaptations in an anthropological sense. But no, it's to make money for capitalists. And so what this ends up doing, though, is that when our entire culture is inherently tied to things like, for example, for me, Lego, and for so many young girls, it was Barbie, is you see all these moments about how deeply, deeply meaningful it is to our lives. These are things that they are all of our memories, everything that we have that has meaning to ourselves in our own lives, basically goes back to the root of someone made this so they could make money off of you and keep you buying more and more and more. And I just thought that was a really kind of interesting part about the movie. Like I came away from the movie like really having enjoyed it, but really what like the movie said itself wasn't actually all that interesting. I mean, it was, I really enjoyed it, but it was your typical, like typical third wave feminism, girl boss, capitalism, pink, all of that. And it was a great, fun movie, but there's so much more that the movie was saying that it didn't intend to say, per se. And just back on that topic of all of our identities and everything who we are, like at the end of the movie, talking about how Ken can just be Ken. He doesn't have to be Ken and Barbie. Ken can be Ken in and of himself. But the fact Ken is still, as he is at his most basic structure, a product, and he will always be a product. He's always something to be sold. He does not have his own identity outside of that. And this kind of is this reification of capitalism, that it takes these abstract things about identity, about our relationships between each other, the idea of childhood, the idea of growth and looking back on one's life and all these memories, and trying to bring your own childhood experiences and give it to your children and have them to have something to enjoy. Is all of these experiences that are innately human and have always been human are now created and commodified, and they have teams of psychologists and sociologists and lawyers and all these different people on these advertising teams to basically psychologically prime us for this capitalist institution. And I just think that there's so much that can be said. I mean, this obviously, like, there's so much scholarship on like reification, recuperation, culture, the culture industry, all of that. But I thought this movie was particularly good for that, because it did like what most children's animated movies do, and with that kind of idea of being yourself. And it did turn it on its head a bit. It was saying you don't have to like be someone special. You can just be ordinary and enjoy your life and go about your day to day. But it still fits really tightly within that mold. And I think it was just a really, really great movie. And I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet. I'm not super interested personally. Like, it probably is a really great movie. I'm personally interested a lot in like the new film techniques that they use. Like, that's really cool. But ultimately, it's about a guy who fucking ruined humanity basically by creating this bomb, and now we're at constant threat. And so there's probably a lot that movie says, but I think Barbie to me is way more interesting, even though I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet. But just in terms of what it has to say about the culture industry. That was a lot to have said, but there you go.